Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm the Online Media Manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Traceability and Agile Processes. This webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. Today's featured speaker is Steve Blaise, PMP, PMI, PBA, author, consultant, teacher, and coach. Steve has over 55 years experience in information technologies. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. We're going to talk about traceability. Traceability, the degree to which a relationship can be established between two or more products of development process. It's been around for a while, since, well, if you look at the screen there, since 1989 at least. I remember doing something similar to traceability back in the late 60s. Note at the bottom there, it says responsibility of the author of an artifact is to provide links to artifacts on which the author bases his work. So that would be like a author of an academic book that I'm sure you all have read one or another of an academic book, and you open it up and it's got all these citations. So they write a paragraph and it cites where they got the information. Well, that's traceability too. So we need traceability. Traceability is everywhere, including Agile, but oh, we're Agile. We don't do traceability. Oh, well, moving on. What we want to do is trace from the source to the final result here. And the source would be the responsibility of the business analyst. You business analysts out there should ensure that all of your requirements have a source of who provided that requirement. Now, it could be a who or it could be a what, like a regulation, but we want to know where that is. And then that gets traced through design and into code. And there is an example of requirements being traced to code, because I get a lot of questions. You're doing traceability, but how do you do code back to requirements? Well, this is what we all do, including in Agile. And we're Agile, we don't do traceability. Well, you're a business analyst, and there's my, if you've seen any of my previous webinars, you see that I have my same old business analyst there, and she's thinking about questions. Management is asking how close we are to finishing, and I'm the business analyst. Project managers know that. And oh, well, wait a minute, there's no project manager. This is Agile, so, oh, you're asking me. How am I going to know that? Earned value or something like that. Somebody talked about earned value one time. The VP wants to make a change, and says, hey, this is not going to be a difficult thing to do. Easy, no impact at all. But how do I know that's true? How do I know there's not going to be any impact? Well, that said that all these requirements are tested, and we've gone through all these sprints and so forth. But how do I know they have been tested? How do I know that all the requirements have been done so that we can actually run this thing live? So yeah, we have four teams. That's what it is. 4 teams developing the software components, but we're not always sure who's doing what. How can I coordinate that? Especially when we've got multiple product owners. And if I want to change a requirement, I don't know who to tell about it. Who I can let know, because, well, if it's the VP and we change her requirements, there's going to be a lot of problems. I wonder how I can get the answers. Oh, yeah, Steve, I knew you were going to say that. Traceability tells you where the requirement came from and who asked for it originally, and who asked for a change to that one that was asked for originally. It tells you what happens if we change this one requirement. It tells you where else. The old thing of side effects. You make a change here and something unexpected happens over there. If you had traceability, it wouldn't be unexpected. What backlog items are you working on, and how do they relate to other backlog items that are done or coming? How does this particular story fit in with other stories? Who is doing what? Who is doing it when? Yeah, traceability answers all those things. Well, yeah, but it's not all positive. If it were, everybody would be using traceability. And we already know it. They said that Agile doesn't use traceability. So let's face it. If you've ever dealt with Doors or Requisite Pro or any Harvest or any of those tools that do requirements management, it's a lot easier than building a spreadsheet, which I have done to try to manage traceability, and it is a pain. It is drudgery. So the tools are there to do that, but you still have to provide the links. If you do a design element, you've got to tell the tool it links to this requirement. If you do a requirement, you got to tell the tool where you got it from. If you have a high-level requirement, a low-level requirement, when you do the low-level requirement, you got to tell it which high-level requirement. That's, hey, all I want to do is write requirements. I don't want all this other stuff. There's a lot of paperwork. If you don't have the tools, there's a lot of paperwork anyway, and potential human error. Hey, Steve, did you get the thing traced? Oh, no, I forgot. When was it supposed to be done? 2 weeks ago. We're out of date now. It also tends to extend the time frame, especially in maintenance, because you have to add in those links. And if you're going to make changes, you got to go back and change the links for every one of them. Now it goes here and not there. And because of human error, and because of the time, and because of the learning curve, we may not keep the matrix updated. That one that I did on the spreadsheet, it was a small project. I was project manager, and I thought, hey, the traceability really sounds good. I mean, look at all the good stuff it does for you, all the questions it answers. That's really cool. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right. Set up the spreadsheet. Got the columns for each of the artifacts and the kind of like a Scrum task board. Of course, this was before Scrum. And I'm going to keep it up to date, put the dates in, put the links in, all the numbers. And I did it. It was only maybe 10, 15 pieces of code, or maybe 50, 60 requirements. Second week, we had a lot of changes. And so I did that. It took me a couple of hours to get it done on a Thursday, and then more changes. And it started sliding. Oh, I'll get to that. I've got to take care of this fire over here. And pretty soon, it would take me 3 or 4 hours to catch up. I said, I just don't have time to do that right now. Then we had to use it for something, wanted to check something out, and it was out of date. It was not useful anymore. We lost trust in it. So even if I tried to put it up to date, no one was going to use it. And all the work I had put in, I recognized it because I was the one who didn't keep it up to date. It was gone. Great idea, but man, if you aren't disciplined to keep it up, it goes away. Well, after all, it is documentation. And we don't like to do a lot of, I didn't like to do documentation. I lasted a couple of weeks. I thought that itself was good. So we got to get those answers though. I mean, she's got a whole bunch of answers there. And she's got an Agile team. She says she's got 4 teams there. So she says, okay, we're not really doing traceability. Now, Steve said we do it, but we probably should be doing it. And we get these 4 teams and I'm just not sure they're going to help me get the information. Maybe I should go over and ask the teams what they're doing to provide that kind of traceability thing so we can do all that tracking and answer those questions. So, hey, Agile teams, what are you doing with traceability? Traceability? No, we don't do no traceability around here. That's all upfront stuff. You got to do a lot of work up, and you got to do you have to have the design done in order to have something to trace to. We don't do design up front. We do have evolving design. And that's just unnecessary busy work. And after all, it's documentation. And the second principle, second tenet of the Agile Manifesto says, working software over extensive documentation. So we're not going to do that. Don't bother me anyway, because I'm coding. Trace a what ability? Trace who? Trace what? Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, because we're Agile. We don't do traceability. Go away. Well, that's quite an attitude. We have questions that need to be answered. They seem to be legitimate questions. So what kind of legitimacy could you have in Agile that says you don't need traceability? Well, let's take a look. Are there legitimate reasons for it? Yeah. To start with, we're doing small pieces of work. We trace because we're talking about 4 or 5 months effort, and over that time, it's good to have the track of what we're doing and know where we're going. But if we're only working 2 weeks, it's done, we go on to the next one. Well, what kind of traceability do you need for that? Besides, the second principle of the Agile Manifesto says that the way that we measure success is through working software. So what do I need traceability to tell me I'm halfway done or partly done? I've traced this to this and this is done. We don't have a whole lot of artifacts anyway. All the documentation that you'd need to check after the fact, which is why theoretically you do documentation so you can go back and know what's going on, it's all in the code. You want to fix something? Look at the code. You don't know how to read code? You shouldn't be fixing it. We're Agile. And besides, we're never too far from the source anyway. We're always talking to the business. It's the whole idea of Agile is the developers talk directly to the people with the problems. So, we get a problem, just go straight to the source and clear it up. It's small teams, come on, 7 plus or minus 2. We've got collective ownership, that's another principle. We can all remember where things are and who's done what. And well, let's face it, we're talking about iterative software. We're talking about doing the entire requirements, design, build, and test all in one day if we follow Ron Jeffries. At least we're doing it all no more than 2 weeks. So we're not running around building a lot of documents because that takes up too much time. We got no formal requirements documents. I say a bunch of user stories, yeah, but they're on cards and we stick them to the wall, put them on the task board. We got no formal analysis documents. We got no design documents. We got no artifacts, so there's nothing to link. Why would we need traceability? And all of that is always formal. It's got to be following a structure. And that implies unneeded overhead. It takes us away from doing what we're there to do, which is code. Now, I'm a little bit, well, yeah, it sounds like I'm an awful lot empathetic and sympathetic with that because, well, I sat on Agile teams doing development. And yeah, that's what it's all about. You say, hey, wait a minute. We have traceability. We've had traceability for 50 years or more, longer. Well, we got to be using it by somebody's got to be using it. What about the project manager? Yeah, well, we can use traceability to make sure all requirements have been implemented. All the testing has been done, all the design elements, and they all link together. And to make sure that the developers aren't developing any additional code, gold plating the work. The business analyst needs to validate the requirements. Again, make sure there are no extra requirements that aren't going to be done. Make sure that all the requirements are detailed to the right level. Business management wants to identify impacts of all the requested changes they make. So we can put the change request through and get an accurate reading of this is what it's going to take to do. And quality assurance needs to make sure that we've got all these tests. Have we actually tested all the requirements? That seems to be legitimate. So what happens in Agile? Well, to start with, there's no project manager. The team decides what they're going to do and assigns the work to themselves. So, there is no project manager to verify the requirements have been implemented. That's the team. And there's no business analyst either, right? So we don't need somebody there to validate requirements. Again, the team's going to do that. If you're a business analyst, you're a member of the team and you're a developer. And we're working directly with business analysts. We don't talk to the business management, they talk to the product owners. So the product owner is going to make sure that the change will go through. We just get the results and put them in the sprint backlog. And quality assurance, again, they're part of the developers, not a separate team. So, oh dear, all that's left is the developers in Agile, and they already told us they don't do traceability. Well, they say there's no need for traceability. But is there or isn't there? Are we going to be able to connect the dots to say why we're doing this story, why we're doing this backlog item over a long period of time? Yes, each sprint is only 2 weeks, but the project might last 3 years. And Agile, Scrum, XP, even FDD, phased iterative development, Evo, they were all small, designed to make changes to websites, something we could do in 2 weeks and then actually roll it out into production. Now we're talking about large projects, big data, lots of data coming in through the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence and machine learning and business intelligence and big data mining, predictive analytics, lots of big stuff that takes a long time to do. But we're going to do them in small pieces. Well, where are we connecting those small pieces? Where are we putting them together in a logical thing? It's all up to the product owner. And how about reusability within or among teams? How about coordination of multiple teams? There's got to be some kind of linkage and connection between all those teams. What about sharing software among teams? We've tried that. Scrum came up, Schwaber came up with the Scrum of Scrums. A member of the Scrum team would get together with the members of other Scrum teams, and they would have a meeting and coordinate. Now, we tried that at 7 teams in the middle of Pennsylvania at a clinic. We were working on the HIPAA stuff. That's a while ago. And we tried the Scrum of Scrums. Ended up, the original project manager, who gave up the title project manager because he was very, very much of an adherent to Scrum, he took on the job of software development manager, and he became the Scrum of Scrums. He was the coordinator of all the 7, worked out the coordination. But he had, this is going here and that's going there. How about enhancing the human memory? Hey, we're working so hard, I don't remember what we said last Tuesday. How about linking to infrastructure and integration? Isn't there some kind of need for some kind of traceability and connection and linkage and compliance with regulatory? A lot of it, the FDA in the United States has demands that you trace. In financial worlds, the Sarbanes-Oxley 401 section says you have to show where the change came from. You have to trace it. How about the data when it's coming in? You want to trace that data that you're using to produce the response in ChatGPT. That's not being done now, but that's some of the things we have to do to make sure that it is accurate information. Well, how about we do some links and dependencies? That seems to be something we do in Agile. Linking test cases, sequencing user stories, identifying backlog dependent items that are dependent on each other. How about this? We do user stories. That's a facsimile. The original card I still have, written by Ron Jeffries, 1990 something. It's a user story written by the guy who invented user stories. And you notice on the front there's a user story. That's it. That's not a as a this, I want to do that. That came along with Rachel Davis back in 2005, 10 years later. This is the original. And so you have a user story right there. We're going to add an undo button or cancel button. So we want to link that test case, a user story, to a test case. No, we don't need no traceability, right? All we have to do is write it right on the card. And it even says TC, test case. So we're going to do that. How much better linkage can you get? How much better traceability? Now, in our cases, when we were doing this, we found it virtually impossible to write the user story and the test case on the front of the card. And we decided to use the back of the card for our estimate. Notice he's also got the estimate there. Now I guess we wrote bigger. So we used the back of the card for the estimate. So they flipped the card over to see what the estimate is for that. And we say, you got a bunch of numbers on the back of the cards, give us a total of 80. Oh, cool. Now we've got the ones we're going to work on. What we would do is get a separate piece of paper. For the US people, that would be 8.5 by 11. For out of the US, it would be A4 paper. And we would attach it to the card. That's a big staple up there attaching it. On that would be the answer to the question, how do you know that this user story is complete and works as it should? What do you need to see? Everything you need to see to prove to you that this user story worked. And we found that when they answered that question, we couldn't fit it on a card. So we clipped it. We traced it. All the test cases then from that piece of paper were traced to that card. But that's linkage. That's not traceability, right? We're not doing traceability. We're just linking test cases to user stories. But it will serve the purpose. Okay, well, what about connecting the user stories together? Remember that user stories are all independent. They're created independently. They're not dependent on each other. That's so that I can do each user story separately. I can take one, I give you one, I give somebody else one. We can all work on a separate user story and not have to say, okay, you have to do that before I can do this. But that doesn't help us get any kind of sense of user stories. So Jeff Patton came up with a concept of user story mapping. And that's coming like on the old big visible board there. Across the side going horizontally is activities that are ordered to explain how the behaviors work. I do this, then I do this, then I do this. Going down, it shows the evolution. The top part is your MVP, and then we add in this, and then we add in this. Going down, we keep the software we're developing keeps evolving and getting bigger and more complex and more features being added and so forth. So we're tracing, I shouldn't use that word, right? But we're tracing the process, no matter where the user stories are on the backlog, and we're tracing in the evolution. You say, well, that's cool. Not very many people really use user story mapping. Well, you've also got the product roadmap. If you're working in SAFe or any of the scalable methods, they've adopted from product development the product roadmap. It comes out of product development, design thinking, other places, and it kind of gives you the overall look of what everything's going to do for this 5-year project you're on or this 2-year project you're on. Because as a developer, all I'm concerned with is the next 2 weeks. Okay, isn't that, well, it's not traceability, it's sequencing. And Jeff Patton is very clear about this is sequencing the stories. The product roadmap is sequencing the events. Okay, but we're answering the questions, right? Well, how about the product backlog dependencies? We got features, we got defects. Yeah, we put defects back on the product backlog. We got non-functional requirements. We got all sorts of things on the product backlog, not just stories. And they are related to each other. I have a story that says I want to see to be able to extract information from this database. I got another story that says I want to build a database. Another one that says I want to maintain the database. There's got to be some kind of linkage there, some kind of dependency. I can't access it until I build it. So I want to get some kind of coordination in my product backlog so that I can effectively group. I'm the product owner. I want to effectively group these stories together, these backlog items, so that in one sprint, we're doing similar type of work. It might also affect the sprint goals that the team has. And when we get to releases, I can identify themes. All of these are user interface. The theme for the next 2 sprints is clean up the user interface because the users want them to get their interface done. By having some kind of dependency tracking, I can do that. But Isn't that traceability? Maybe not. So that product owner seems to be the one who is going to be doing anything at all with traceability, because the developers over there are saying, we're Agile, we don't do traceability. So what is the product owner doing? Separating from those developers by the product backlog. And that would be true. If all I'm seeing is the product backlog, I talk to the product owner a lot. I talk to any users once or twice during the sprint. The product owner is then tracing the requirements to the source, because during the sprint planning session, the developers are asking questions. It'd be nice to know who put that item in the product backlog so I can bring that person in to answer those questions. I want to link the requirements for effective, efficient way of putting them in the backlog. I've got to keep refining the backlog. As I add more requirements, I'm going to be moving things around. Well, it would be nice if I had some kind of numerical trace of what those requirements and how they relate to each other. We also, every time we come in with a new question, I'm over here, everything to the left over here is all the business. I'm talking to all these business people. And I'm product owner, I probably have a bunch of business analysts going out doing the legwork for me. But there's going to be a lot of changes. Of course there are. We're talking about a 2 or 3 year project. And we welcome changes in Agile, right? Embrace change, but every change has impact. We're just going to do them without any recognition of the impact, the cost. So, hey, we need some way of doing that. And of course, we want to know the sequence and dependencies so we can help determine the overall priority and make sure it's always prioritized and anything at the top is the highest priority. So it goes out in the next sprint. Well, you say, okay, sounds like we're doing something it sounds like traceability. Well, how about the tools? Now, I mentioned Requisite Pro and Doors and Harvest and other tools out there that do requirements traceability as part of overall requirements management. And some of the things like System Architect and those kind of things, they have built in. What about the Agile tools? Well, there's 4 randomly selected, folks. I'm not pushing any one of these. On their websites, here's a quote from each of them. This is not my quote. Urban Turtle, which is an add-on to Microsoft Team Foundation. You get real-time data to follow the evolution of your project and improve your processes. Evolution of your project in real time. Evolution. That's what traceability is, right? Jira has customizable workflows, linking issues, and versioning. You can link epic stories, tasks, and bugs and create dependencies between them. Rally says, through hierarchical linking of user stories, tasks, and defects, Rally provides a centralized platform for managing requirements, tasks, defects. Now, Rally is a leader in the Agile software management, and dependencies are well tracked. See, they're using all the words we've been using, but, well, here's version 1, another one of those leaders. They've been around for a long time. Links across epics, features, stories, defects, and tasks. A visual way to track dependencies and relationships. But notice, do you see the word traceability there? It's not there, but it certainly seems like they're talking about all the things traceability does to give you all the good stuff you get out of it. Why? Well, that's because as human beings, we need to know where we are in the flow of things. I need to know what's coming up as much as possible. I need to know what's happened as much as possible, where I stand in line. This is a natural thing. We all want that. We need to fit our actions and our observations and everything around us into some big picture context. Why are we here? What's going on? Where are we going? What's happening tomorrow? We're always more comfortable with process. We're a lot more comfortable with a flow chart than we are with an entity relationship diagram. We're a lot more comfortable with knowing that there's a 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of trying to figure out the Fibonacci sequence. But even the Fibonacci sequence is still a sequence once we work it out, figure out what it is. I'm comfortable with it. We are. How do we know? Because we've done the cognitive studies over the years, and the brain using functional MRIs, and the brain lights up and shows us we're more comfortable with sequences than we are with chaos. We have an innate desire to reduce risk, to reduce uncertainty, to know what the impact of actions will be. We certainly get all upset at kids who do things without thinking about what the result of what they're going to do. Think about what you're going to do before you do it. Know the consequence of your actions. And, well, you know, we actually, a lot of times, all we really want to do is know who to blame. As they say, when you can keep your head and you're calm, when all things around you are going crazy, it's because you have somebody to blame in mind. And here, you know, maybe you don't want to do a study and do a functional MRI in your head, but, you know, I would bet that 80 to 90% of you are looking at that, and your first thought is, I wonder if any of those pieces fit together. That is natural. That's kind of chaotic. All those pieces there. Our automatic reaction is try to say, oh, I want to get a little bit more order in the chaos by putting a couple of those pieces together. Back in the years when we're talking about the 1960s, when I went to college, the men's dorms and the women's dorms were in opposite sides of the campus. And, you know, it was all men's and women, and they were not mixed floors and all that. And you go to the women's dorm to pick up your date for a party or something. And you were, as a male, you had to stay on the bottom floor and wait. And they called upstairs and let them know that your escort is here. In the middle of the women's dorm lobby, where they stayed, was a card table. On the card table was always a jigsaw puzzle in progress. And I noticed, probably many other people did, that people who would be walking past the jigsaw puzzle, the table with the jigsaw puzzle, it was just there. I mean, some people might be sitting in chairs working it, but, you know, it would be there. Say a Friday night, everyone's getting ready to go out, and there's the jigsaw puzzle. Anybody that walked by it would pause and look around to see if they could put a piece together. Almost universally, everyone would stop and they'd get one or two pieces and then they go away. We could not stand to see that puzzle undone. We had to see that problem. I don't care about the puzzle, but I just, you know, let me see if this piece works. That's normal human beings. So if we want all that, then you as a BA or the product owner or both should try to get things organized more or less. You know, we get all those unrelated backlog items, individual teams focused on just their backlog, just their next sprint, relying on the faulty memory and collaboration of the team members, dealing with the constant pressure that is intermittent and never consistent from the business. We're going to use story mapping and backlog item dependency tracking, linking independent test cases to stories, track potentially releasable product increment to the releases. We're going to do product roadmaps. We're going to do all sorts of things that will bring order out of the chaos so that we can keep our eyes and everybody else's eyes on the prize. Isn't that cool? But, yeah, we're Agile, we don't do traceability. Well, that means in Agile, don't use traceability. It's got such a bad reputation. It implies a lot of boring record keeping that instead of writing code, and it's all just for audit anyway. It's all after the fact looking for somebody to blame. Instead, use linkage or dependency or trace tracking or sequencing. Get that big, better picture view, increase the coordination and collaboration, control and promote reuse, which we as human beings want, but don't call it traceability. And traceability, Tracy, we're ready for questions.
Steve. Excellent. Thanks, Steve, for that great presentation. You're getting some nice comments saying what an awesome presentation. Just a reminder for all of our attendees, if you have any questions, just type them into the questions box. This is your chance to ask Steve questions on traceability or any of the other topics and webinars that I'm sure you've attended this year. Steve, while we're waiting for these questions to come in, maybe I'll just pass it back to you if there's any kind of wrap up or follow up you wanted to do on the presentation, anything that you didn't get to yet. It looks like our attendees are a little quiet today.
Oh, okay. There's a lot of argument there, and there has been for years, even in the non-Agile community, about the viability of traceability. The amount of overhead involved with keeping up the traceability. In some cases, you would have to have maybe one or two people devoted to doing nothing but that. And we were working on a project back in the 80s for IBM, and we had one person who's almost was full-time job, trying to make sure that all of the code we were doing was traced back and so forth. Now, this had a significant impact because we were working on the OS 90 operating system. And so you had to know, if you're making a change here, what would that cause someplace else? That's a mass amount of assembler language code and so forth. So that would make sense. And it was worth the extra money, time, overhead to kind of track that. But when you're walking out and doing a payroll application, you couldn't get the people to cough up the money or devote the time. Now, we worked on government contracts, and they demanded that you provide traceability. And you might or might not. And unfortunately, what usually happened was you would write the traceability after the whole thing was done, which means it would be nice for future, but it certainly didn't help while you were developing. So that we used to do an Agile thing. It was an approach called phased iterative development, and we guaranteed to the customers that 100% guaranteed that the requirements would absolutely match the delivered software to the letter. Absolutely. If we didn't make it absolutely match the requirements match the delivered software, you'd get your money back. Not once out of the maybe dozen or so projects that I was involved with did we have to give our money back. Now, how on earth do you think that we could absolutely guarantee and make sure that the requirements that met this design and the system actually delivered on all the requirements? And you say, I know, Steve, you're going to tell us you use traceability. No, we didn't use traceability. We figured that traceability wouldn't work. We used something a little simpler. We delivered the requirements when we delivered the system. As we developed it, it was Agile, so we developed the requirements and everything as we went. And at the end, the requirements were modified to match the system, guaranteed to match the system, because we had the system ready to go live. We had the requirements to match the system. So we gave them what amounted to basically a description of the system that they were using, not necessarily what they wanted to use, because just like Agile, we knew that what they wanted at the beginning was not going to be what they wanted at the end. We wanted to give them a system that said, this is what you wanted, this is what you got. And we did. So the easy way, if you don't want to do a traceability, you don't want to do all the changes or requirements, and you want to make sure that you deliver a system that matches the requirements, deliver the requirements when you deliver the system.
Thanks, Steve. We have now questions coming in, so I'm going to jump on in. Sharon is asking, can you just take us back to slide 23? So just go back 2 slides.
Let's see if we can do that. Get that there, and 23, which is there.
There you go, Sharon. And then I'm going to jump into the next question here. I've seen demos of AI tools that make traceability much more palatable. Do you think that may change Agilist perspectives?
My belief is founded on a lot of work with Agile. I did 55 years. You know that I did a lot of work non-Agile, a lot of linear work and so forth, and that was all good. We didn't have any problems with it, developing software, and the software worked, and we were happy with it. And the last 30 years has been Agile. So I got both sides. And I see a lot of things they do in Agile that we've been doing for years. And they say, we would never do what you do. We don't do waterfall. We don't do this. We don't do that because it's all bad. And yet, they're doing the same thing. They just call it something different. So my theory is that they are actually taking the advantages. And guys I've worked with in Agile teams are doing forms of traceability, but you never call it traceability because that's waterfall, that's linear, that's bad stuff. But they're doing basically the same thing: tracking, sequencing, identifying dependencies, linking. They have to. They're human beings. But they don't want to call it traceability. So the answer to your question is, yeah, they're going to do it because it's there, and they do it now. But as you saw in those definitions from the tools, the tool makers are avoiding using the word traceability, and yet if you ask for a definition of traceability, they gave it to you. So yeah, they're going to use traceability, just not going to call it. If you want to use traceability, don't call it traceability.
Thank you. And I have a funny comment on that. As Sharon said, well, as much as Agile does not like to use traceability, they are doing it, and with
Exactly.
a smile.
Yes.
Excellent. Let me jump into the next one, Steve. How to do Agile traceability without access to the code, for example, with software providers?
What we're going to do, we had that issue many times, in fact. If the software provider doesn't provide you with the documentation, including traceability, and they may look on it as proprietary, which is fine. Your option there is to make sure that it's escrowed in case they go out of business or something else. You can get to it that way. So instead of going to the software, you go to as close to the software as you can get. Features that are this group of software, so you trace it to the features. The requirement requires you to do this, and you trace it to an operational thing. It's number 4 on the menu, or it's that icon. If I click on that, I get this thing done. So you find something that will make sure that it's there. My analogy would be this: you buy something, and you have a list of the things that you have ordered. Maybe your living room furniture, and you've got the table, the chair, the lamps, and so forth. You have a room full of furniture, and you have a list of what you ordered. So you take a look at that list, and you go through and you check things off. There's the lamp. I can't see that's in a box, but it says lamp on that, so that's the other lamp. And there's the table. It isn't made yet. I got to put it together, but I have the table. And then I have to check the things. Do I have all the parts? That's how we would approach a purchased software, or what do they call that? A bespoke, right? A bespoke software. I would go through and say, these are the things I want. Do we have it? And if we have it, where is it? I can't get inside the software, but I can certainly say, there's software behind this. That's what is driving this piece of this feature. Hopefully that made sense.
I think it did. We have another question on that a little. What have you found is the best way to document how and why the software works as it does?
I know you're looking for a different answer than my answer, which would be the way I find out the software does what it does is to do it. To try it. Now, here's Word. We're supposed to type. We're supposed to let you type in what you want and then print it out. All right. I'm going to type in something and I'm going to print it. Yep, it worked. That I can't think of anything better than that. However, just as you may be looking for something more, I would say that you're better off doing it in a more structured way. Now, I have been, as I did my duty as a tester way back when, and we did structured testing. This, we were supposed to from what's his name, but after a while you do that kind of exploratory testing, where you just sit down and try things to see what happens. And that's where you're looking to see the robustness of the system and the scalability of the system and the reliability and so forth. But initially, you're going to follow a structure. I'm going to do this, followed by this, followed by that. That is a better way of finding out what does happen. If you've got a list of features that this is supposed to do in a sequence, you follow the sequence. But the best way of finding out if it does what it's supposed to do is to do it.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, do they have any examples of how they have used traceability on their product teams in a tool like PlanView or IBM's CCM tool or Doors, and how did that go?
I'm not familiar personally
Another
with
thing,
any.
IBM CCM also equals enterprise.
Right, yeah. I'm not familiar with any, personally worked on or familiar with any agile implementation of Doors. Now, Doors is an object-oriented system. That's what it stands for. The OO in Doors is object-oriented, but working in Agile, I have not seen it. Now, I do not know whether that's because Doors is, by definition, the granddaddy of all requirements management tools. And therefore, it's linked in the minds of the Agile people directly to waterfall. So they don't want to use it. And if Doors came out and said, we are the greatest Agile, they win the Nobel Prize in Agile requirements management, the Agilists would still say, I'm sorry, you're connected with the old guys. We don't use you. I don't know if that's the case. It's just a bias, or that they just don't work very well with Agile. I just don't know. I've never seen it actually used. IBM and what was the other one you mentioned?
Oh,
go ahead.
PlanView?
PlanView. Not that familiar with PlanView, other than working on it from a perspective of creating plans rather than execution. But IBM does do traceability, the IBM tool. But they, like the others, if you look at their enterprise description of their Agile, to work with Agile, it talks about dependencies, linking things. It doesn't use traceability. It may say we trace by use of this, but they don't say this is our page on traceability. This is how you do traceability. It's the same functionality, linking things together so that you can track things. But again, they're kind of shying away from traceability. And if anybody in the world should be pushing traceability, it would be IBM.
Thanks, Steve. We do have a bunch of questions now, so I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. Do they have any examples of, oh, sorry, nope, I just moved our thought. Any thoughts about the artificial intelligence tools that automate tracing?
Yes, I'm working with some right now. We're building a machine learning function. And basically what we're doing, it's kind of a data mining model written in Python and PHP and I think there's some R in there. And the idea is to kind of mimic what we would do with traceability. And we got the people who are training it. And the training part is to produce a traceability list from software. And we know it should look like this. And we look at the list and say, oh, that's wrong, and you missed this and this and this. And we feed that back in, and this is called supervised, and we're using supervised machine learning. And that goes in, and the code, the module, the model then learns from the data that this is no longer a traceability thing, but this we should have had there. And it comes out again, and it's closer. And we adjust it again, and it comes out. And eventually, it won't be asking. We won't see any errors, and we'll put it against another set of data. Then we map the set of data from the larger and see if it looks mathematically like the data points that we came up with off the training. If it does, we can let it go, and now we've got a tool that will do traceability automatically. It will do the linking, and it will do it based on some kind of cues by automatically categorizing the software and then linking that categorized software. Machine learning is excellent in terms of doing categorization, especially clustering. Now, we're not using clustering in the algorithm, just the categorization. And so far, it's very promising. So some of the tools say they're AI and they're not. If they use machine learning, they're defined as artificial intelligence because they're part. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence could very well use it. And what we would do with the artificial intelligence, and I don't know if anybody's actually doing this yet, but what we would do is we'd set up our intelligent agents to go out and explore the software, looking for, I don't want to say similarities, I'll use the word connection, it's a bad word, but something in the software that would connect it to another piece of software, for example. Something in the test software, automated test software, that connects it to the code. And then it would learn, the agents would come back, the agents would send the information back to the model, same machine learning model. Then it would update based on that. We wouldn't even get involved. I'm not totally sold that we're at a point where we can depend on it. But then I'm sitting around waiting for them to start selling airplane cars, so I can buy an airplane car. So I'm out there at the forefront of that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see artificial intelligence doing all of the traceability stuff for us as we code.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, what if you don't have a defined product roadmap?
Lots of answers to that. First of all, you don't need one. If I am building, if my product backlog is primarily changes to existing systems, modifications to websites that are already in existence, and so forth, I wouldn't need a product roadmap. I might be working on multiple different products and so forth. Somebody might have one, the product owner might have one, or product development, or somebody might have a product roadmap. But as the developers, these guys sitting there looking at the screen, they don't need a product roadmap. Now, if you're building one overall product, like we were doing HIPAA, at the end, our 7 teams were going to be completely compliant with HIPAA. And over that time, it was a number of years, over that time, some of the teams would just get completely lost. It was like they forgot that they were there to do HIPAA. And that's where you need the product roadmap. Now, we did not have a product roadmap. And there are still, if you get into some Agile zealots, you'll find them just absolutely adamantly against the product roadmap, just like even Jeff Patton, who is a well-respected Agilist. Some of them say, no, this whole user story, this story map thing is just extra documentation. We don't do that kind of stuff. We can just link the stories by ourselves. So we could actually do a big project without a product roadmap. But if you're doing a product, a new product, say for the company, you're doing a new AI product that you're going to go out and sell, or you're converting, you're in a digital transformation, and you're converting from multiple channels to multi-channel or omni-channel, that takes a long time. You're going to want a product roadmap that says what is going to happen when, because you've got to coordinate that with the users who are going to be using it, with the different departments who are going to be also affected by an omni-channel. But you don't need a product roadmap. Now, if you find that you're losing sight of the overall goal of a long-term project. You're in a 5-year project, 3-year project. You should, even if you're in the middle of it, stop. Especially if you're a manager or a product owner or something, stop and take a step back and say, from this point on, what is my overall product roadmap going to look like? It's a good thing to have. Now, if you're working in SAFe, that one of the things you have to do is build a product roadmap. The assumption in SAFe is that you're working on a 4 or 5 year project. You've got 4 or 5, 6 teams, and so forth. So I gave you a bunch of different answers there, but basically, you don't need a product roadmap. So if you don't need it, don't do it.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, at what point should reports needed enter the sprint discussions? How do you avoid the issue of having a report as a deliverable, but the data structure built out can't provide the data in the way that it is needed?
Stubs. That is not an unusual situation. Many times the users and the product owner representing the users want to see something. And it's going to take 4 or 5 weeks to build the database, to get the maintenance of that database, to get the data clean and so forth. But they want to see something. And what you deliver in 2 weeks is not going to be of tremendous amount of value because you're still building the database. And there's not a whole lot of value in just having a database out there to the users who are looking to use it. So the product owner will put in a product a backlog item, a story, if you will, that says generate such and such a report. And the conversation will go with the development team. Will say, we can't develop the report without the database. And the product owner will say, yes, I know that. We say, you understand that we can develop the report, but what we do to develop the report is going to be lost when we develop the database. It's waste time. Yes, I do. I understand that, but it's worth doing it. Okay, so we build stubs. We build a fake database with enough data to generate a report, and we put out the report. Now, we're not putting out a fake report. We're just saying print this, print this, print this. It's actual code that prints from a database, a mock database. And we're doing it specifically so we have something to give to the users so they can look at it and say, okay, this report's okay, but I need to have it changed in this way and that way. And we need another report now to do this. So they have something they can feed back other than a piece of paper or sketch. Then we go in and we build the real database for delivery, 2 or 3 sprints later. That we've done. And I'm not in favor of it. I'm not suggesting it's a great thing to do, but sometimes it's necessary. So that the answer to that is a one-word answer. How do you get the report out when you don't have a database? You use stubs.
Thanks, Steve. We are almost out of time. I'm going to try and get one more question in. Why I'm reading that, let's put this onto your contact slide at the end. Our last question, as a BA, I'm on a different level as a developer. For example, I work with epics, features, and stories. These are clearly linked. What can you say about how the mapping or connections to the code and thus to the developer world should be?
The rule that we had on the first slide, the rule of traceability, and it's been inviolate as far back as I can remember, so at least 55 years, is that if you create the document, you create the artifact, you are responsible for tracing it. I write the code, I am going to trace it to what you want. You have a story, I'm writing the code to implement that story. My job is to trace it to that story. It's not your job as a business analyst to find out what piece of code implements your story. You're busy tracing story to epic, to feature, and so forth. So you're going to have, remember that we're talking object-oriented, so we've got small pieces of code. We've got 1, 2 methods, trying to keep our cohesion to the law of Demeter. So very small pieces. So that one story might have 8 different pieces of code. All of the people, all of us who are writing that code, all have to link back to that one story, that one backlog item. You should be getting that information so that you know, here is this backlog item, and those are 8 pieces of code are being there. Now, the question that I would ask as one of the developers is, why do you need to know exactly what piece of code is implementing your story? Isn't it more important that you know that your story works? That when you put in the account number, all the information on the account comes up and allows you to change it. And you can change it very easily. Isn't that more important than knowing which piece of code? We need to know the code because we need to fix it if something goes wrong. But why would you, representing the user, need to know that? So my responsibility is to make sure the trace is there, the link back to your story. Your responsibility is to make sure it works and the user is happy. Well, not happy, but at least satisfied that the story worked.
Thank you, Steve. We are out of time. I'm going to quickly read this comment because I think it just sums it up. What a fantastic presentation full of real insights into the real world of a product development and how to deal with it. Genius. So again, Steve, thank you so much for presenting another excellent webinar for us. We are out of time, and I'm hearing people are saying concur with that comment that someone wrote. We'd also like to thank all of our attendees for joining today's Modern Analyst webinar. And I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at the ModernAnalyst.com website within a few business days. This concludes today's event, and we hope everyone has a great day or a night. And again, Steve, thanks so much. We'll see you all again.